Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to track 3. This is when the Secretary of State says, please stop hacking us. And without further ado, I give you David On.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon. So I'm going to share some insights from my work over in government. And you'll notice that with diplomacy, there's been remarkable consistency over the hundreds of years in diplomatic relationships, and also in the way that diplomats negotiate with one another, and the way that diplomats maybe use a threat of military force to back up that talks. But what is new is that cybersecurity is a new topic in diplomacy. And you don't have many books on that. You don't really hear much about the government to government aspect, which is why I'm happy to be here today to share my insights with you. So for the past 5.5 years, I was a political military officer over at the State Department. And in my role, I helped plan a lot of security dialogues, bilateral, multilateral dialogues. And I also worked really closely with the cyber offices throughout the State Department and in other US government offices. Over at the State Department, we work closely with the policy shop, Cyber. It's the cyber policy office directly under the Secretary of State. There's also another office, INR Cyber, which is the intelligence side. And then various bureaus also have their lead officer for cybersecurity that represents their bureau. And of course, working closely with our colleagues over at the NSA as well. So I'm going to take the experience I had in government and then pair it with the cyber threat that we see going on in the world. And then I'm going to show how governments approach other governments to negotiate and talk and try to solve some problems from state actors and non-state actors. So to lay some groundwork, this will be familiar to most of you. This is the Norse Corporation cyber threat attack map. It's a sample from 2014, but if you pulled out your cell phones or your computers, you could basically see it real time right now. What's happening, what country is hacking what country. It's a representation of what's actually happening in reality, because Norse sets up these honeypots and it tracks what countries sending what hacks to what countries. So it's merely, as they say, the tip of the iceberg, but not necessarily what's actually happening. It's rather a representation. So in addition to that invisible threat that we saw, the cyber activity, that is something that you can't usually see with your eyes, but the map makes it visible. And when I first saw that map, it looked like World War III to me. It looked like if those were missiles and bombs, that's really serious across continents, every region. It just looked very serious. I want to specifically go to one incident in 2014 as well, the DDoS hack that shut down Facebook. Again, I'm laying some background information for you. So with the DDoS attack, distributed denial of service, thousands of computers were a part of a coordinated attack that then they were part of a botnet, which then streamed from East Asia over to the United States. And many of the users and owners of these computers didn't even know that they were part of the attack, because they might have clicked on malware, clicked on a banner, installed malware, and basically installed a stealthy program that lets other people control their computers. So you'll see with this sequence here that the first slide looks a lot like the previous cyber incidences, only the previous ones were single attacks going from country to country. Now this one, the second frame, shows where there's thousands of computers being coordinated right here in a DDoS. And this looks like Street Fighter II Ryu's Hadouken going across from East Asia to the United States. And this is massive coordinated attack to many companies. This might shut down the companies completely. It might take them days or weeks to get back online. It shut down Facebook completely for 30 minutes. For every second they're shut down, they're losing money. Right. So given that there's these attacks that cost governments cost companies a lot of money, that hack government military secrets, there's a lot of reasons for countries to talk about cybersecurity when they have these bilateral dialogues. And every year there are these multilateral and bilateral dialogues that act as action-forcing events. So you can expect that there's going to be a ministerial meeting, or you're going to see the foreign minister is going to see the other foreign minister. What are we going to talk about? And then in the recent years, cyber has become a topic. In the United Nations, it's a multilateral setting. And soon I'm going to talk about some bilateral settings. But in this multilateral setting, the plenary session, the UNGA, is not exactly a place where cybersecurity would be a topic, because that's where a president of a country or a foreign minister has 15 minutes to talk about whatever they say to all the representatives in the world. So rather, cyber would be a topic in the side meetings over at the United Nations. Throughout that week, the heads of state will bring their entire delegations up and down the ladder of seniority from the deputy secretary, undersecretary, and then they'll meet with their counterparts from various governments and talk about a range of issues, including cybersecurity. Now, instead of a multilateral setting, here's an example of a bilateral setting. The USChina SMED. Again, the plenary sessions with the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, this one's huge. It's all the cabinet level secretaries of the US government, US ambassador to the UN, US Secretary of Energy, meeting with their counterparts from China. The plenary sessions are going to be more scripted, so that's not really an appropriate place to bring up cyber details. However, there are breakout sessions that happen alongside those plenary sessions where the subject matter experts and working level will talk to each other, and that's a venue where cybersecurity, cyber diplomacy will come up. And when the U.S. talks with China, it's really trying to identify, what are the state actors and what's the activity that's going on from China state actors that's impacting the U.S. What are the non-state actors, what are the groups, and how can the U.S. convince China to make some changes or to crack down on domestic groups? So the Australian ministerial is a bilateral ministerial, much like the one with China, but the relationship is very different because Australia's relationship with the US is so close and so cooperative. Both are mutual defense treaty allies. Australia is considered NATO +5, so the European NATO countries, plus Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, and Israel. So there's this close cooperation, information, intelligence sharing. So when the U.S. Sits down with the ministers, this is former Secretary Hillary Clinton and former Secretary of Defense Panetta here in the picture, they're going to have a plenary and then they're going to have breakout meetings on the side. But the tone is going to be very different because you don't expect a state actor to be hacking the U.S. from such a close ally. You will be expecting, if there's some action, then it's going to be from the sub-state level, from certain hacker groups. But it's going to be much more cooperative. These allies are going to be saying, tell me who it is, we're going to get the police, we're going to help try to crack down on this. So it's going to be a different kind of conversation. So over the next few minutes, I'm happy to share about my insights on these bilateral dialogues, but to go more deeply and to create a framework for cyber diplomacy, including the roadblocks that we face in cyber diplomacy, problems with finding attribution, and also with disclosing information on how you have the evidence for attribution, the disclosure dilemma I'll talk about in a few slides, and also some recommendations. So back to the basics. What hackers want is they want fame. Maybe hacktivists want to hack for the lulz, for the kicks. They might be going after your credit card so they could buy things. One company might be trying to get intellectual property from a competitor company in another country so that they could have a competitive edge. Or for the military, most often it might be a state-sponsored actor is trying to get military technical drawings of the latest fighter aircraft or attack helicopters, or military strategic planning like the Pentagon's O plans and the CON plans, operation plans. When this occurs, these are really good reasons to sit down with partner countries, whether they're the more cooperative allies or the less cooperative partners, and to raise this in diplomatic dialogue. So the dialogues will be the ones that I mentioned earlier with the Australian ministerial or the US-China SMED. They could also be at more of a working level. The US military has service-to-service talks like army to army. And for the closer US allies, the closer partners, there'll be these hybrid talks where, say, diplomats are talking for an hour. Then they'll spend maybe the first 10 minutes of an intelligence briefing from the CIA or DIA or NSA to lay out the threat or the problem. Then, say, for the rest of that hour, the 50 minutes, will be the policymakers then sitting down with their counterparts in different countries and figuring out, okay, so we see a common picture, how are we going to work together to solve that problem? Cyber becomes a topic in diplomacy when it's in the newspaper, it's prominent, and you just can't ignore it. So you just want to talk about it with your partners. It might not be in the newspaper, but it might be in the intelligence sources. So government officials and government contractors will have access to this information and see some concerns. Also, there are leading offices. There are some offices that will take the lead on a bilateral dialogue, and then they're the ones that coordinate everything, and they're the ones that are going to be able to make changes directly to the agenda as they're setting the agenda. Or an office might not be the lead. They might be a part of the interagency clearance process, but they share an equity. They work on the similar issues of cybersecurity. So the lead office will take talking points and the agenda for the entire meeting, and then clear it with maybe 10 or 20 or 30 other offices at the Pentagon, at the White House, at NSA, and then when they make the edits, then they could go ahead and put in new topics or new ideas there because they're involved in the process. And also, a foreign affairs officer could just put it in, or nobody wants it in, but it was there last year and the year before, so it's a precedence and it's going to be in this year as well. So, when US diplomats and senior officials sit down with other countries, the attribution problem can really be a roadblock. So, when the US sits down with other countries, they'll say, the attribution problem is where, let me back it up. So the attribution problem, as a refresher, is where attack appears to be coming from country A, yet it's only a proxy in country A. It's actually coming from country B through country A to attack you. Or it's maybe several proxies, it's country F going through E, B, C, all the way over to attack you. So among private companies and among individuals, the attribution problem seems very difficult to solve. But the US government has spent a lot of resources to try to solve the attribution problem. And it's a sensitive topic, so I can't really get into it myself. So I'm going to cite Shane Harris's new book. He's a journalist, and he wrote this new book, and he did a lot of research on NSA and about cybersecurity, and he talks about the attribution problem. According to his research, he wrote around page 20, because I looked it up recently, he wrote that basically the NSA had spent a lot of money buying computer software from companies in Reston, Virginia, and New York, and developing their own software in-house, and spent years figuring out a way to effectively solve the attribution problem. So according to his research, this former journalist, through his interviews with senior officials, he's saying that the US government is very advanced on this. And the attribution problem is a really key aspect of diplomacy and all the news you see in the newspapers, because if you can't be sure if an attack is coming from a specific country, then there's nothing to talk about. You can't sit down with a country and say, you're doing this if you don't have attribution right. But say you can get attribution right, and say you do have a high level of confidence based on certain methods, then you'll still approach the disclosure dilemma. And that's where, when you're sitting down with a foreign country and you're saying, you're hacking us, and they're saying, no, we're not, and you're saying, we have evidence, and they're saying, prove it, and you're saying, well, we can't prove it, because if we prove it to you, if we show you exactly how we know you're hacking you, then you're seeing our sources. Who is telling us? Is it an informant in your country? Is it a US embassy officer telling us? Then what are you going to do with them, right? Or you're finding out more about the methods. So next time you could go around and then change your tactics so that we can't discover you next time. So, the disclosure dilemma is such that if you show another country exactly how you know the solution for attribution, it could make them a stronger adversary. So among companies, I often hear CISO officers in private companies lament that in cybersecurity, the only weapon is a shield. And I feel like companies are trying to figure out, how are we being hacked? How can we guard against that? How can we block specific IP so this doesn't happen? But the government is really interested in the who, what, when, where, why. And that's really important for bilateral dialogues, because it paints the global context of hacking. So this is an area where the social sciences could cooperate with computer science so that you have the technical skills plus the language to send people into chat rooms and to talk to certain people in other countries without sounding, if you put it through Google Translate, you'll sound like a kindergartner, right? So, or finding out the legal situation there, what kind of laws can you use? Is rule of law strong or is it weak? What's the relationship between the government and the people? Or the government itself, internally, is the government fragmented, so you're getting hacked by one side of the government, but the other side doesn't even know what's happening? Or is it monolithic, so they really know what's going on, and when you talk to them, you can really affect change? So, private companies, I think the bare minimum is very important to prevent hacking, to stop the bleeding, and to find out how to protect your networks. I think as you move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs at a greater sophistication, above that, it's important then, after you take care of the network protection, to start asking those questions. And I've seen some savvy private companies ask those questions, and quite often it's because their senior CISO officers are former US military or intelligence or NSA. So they find that the answer to the how question is not that satisfying. They want to know the who, what, when, where, why. So what types of cyber hacks are more likely to come up in diplomatic dialogue compared to others? So the kind of cyber attacks that are more likely to come up in dialogue are the state-to-state hacks. When, assuming we could solve the attribution problem by some methods through the NSA, if a foreign government is hacking the US government, then that's definitely going to come up. Because the US is going to think that if we talk to that government, perhaps we can convince them through some ways to prevent this from happening. Moving down on the left, when a non-state actor, when a hacking group hacks the US government, yes, the US government wants to bring up in dialogue because it hopes that that government is going to be able to crack down on that group domestically. But when there's on the right side, when it's a state government hacking a non-state actor like a company or something, it's not necessarily going to come up in dialogue because oftentimes companies don't really want to share that information, so the government might not even know that they're being hacked, or it's so limited, there's very few examples of that. And also in the bottom right quadrant, for people-to-people hacking or company-to-company, that's just so abundant. There's thousands of these hacks every day. People trying to hack your credit card numbers or sending you emails telling you won $10 million. So how do you address this in a diplomatic dialogue, right? So getting back to the classic scenario, when the senior officials sit down with other countries, it's going to look very different if the other country is a US ally versus a less cooperative country. For a US ally or a more cooperative country, it's going to be a conversation, like I said with Australia, it's going to be, we're pretty sure it's not state-sponsored. What is the information that you have? Let us know, because if it's coming from within the country, we're going to try to, use law enforcement and solve it. If it's a mutual threat, let's share information. And then if it's an attack we're both susceptible from another country, then let's kind of find out how we can work together to make sure that we're more safe together. But if it's coming from a country that is going to be less cooperative, then they're going to stonewall with the attribution problem, and you're going to face the disclosure dilemma. So that's where they're going to say, you can't prove it, it's probably a proxy server coming through our country, it could be another country. They're going to say, we too are the victims of hacking, so we are victims just like you. This is all just stonewalling, because then they don't have to do anything to try to help you solve the problem. In diplomatic dialogues, you'll notice that some countries are more helpful and cooperative than others. Surprisingly, Vietnam is very helpful and cooperative in cyber diplomacy. If you find out there's an issue, then the government is very cooperative in that sense. You'll find that in Eastern Europe, there are several countries that are less or more selectively cooperative when it's in their interests, of course. And then other variation is when you see that in Eastern Europe and Russia, that mostly these hacks will target financial institutions, while Southeast Asia and Vietnam is going to be targeting more so e-commerce, while Northeast Asia countries are going to be targeting intellectual property. So these are some general trends that we see. So how we can do better is to work through disclosure dilemma at the private company level so that they feel more comfortable sharing information, so that other companies can learn from their experiences and prevent future hacks is to solve the government level disclosure dilemma and attribution problem. Recognize that this is a growing field and new norms are being formed. If a country says, don't do this is not right, but does it, then it's very hypocritical and the country loses the trust from the people. And also, with all the expertise I see in the room, other countries, other governments, other companies in other companies in other countries can really benefit from your expertise. So consider going beyond the region, going beyond the US market to a more international and global market. To think like a cyber diplomat involves keeping in mind dialogues, the roadblocks that we see, and the recommendations that I mentioned. So that together we could work together to prevent cyber attacks. And feel free to, I'm happy to share my Twitter information, and I'm also working on a book on cyber diplomacy. I'm comparing agents and publishers, so if you have any advice, I'd be happy to hear. Thank you very much for everybody here. And also thank you to Dell SecureWorks and VeriSign for all that I've learned from their subject matter experts and their analysts. Thank you very much for coming today.